Welcome back for another SCP reading, researcher. Today we have SCP-7676, the Grand Symphony of 1976. Before we begin, I'm going to make a note that there are a number of cases where things seem to change in this article. As such, there will be readings of both the before and after parts. Now, without further ado... Item Number, SCP-7676. Object Class, Memetic. Containment Class, Special Containment Procedures. Quarantine Site Zulu 9 has been established around Ground Zero of the 7676 phenomenon, and is to be staffed entirely by personnel fitting criteria null engram. Due to the current shortage of viable personnel within our organization, the Department of Analytics has been tasked with identifying civilians to facilitate ongoing containment of 7676. Mobile Task Force Iota 10, Damn Feds, is responsible for the procurement of these civilians. All conscripts are to be granted level -5/7676 clearance for the duration of their tenure. Due to the virulence of 7676 and its related phenomena, contact between Zulu 9 and the outside world is to be mediated through artificially intelligent constructs. The delivery of requested materials as well as general resource replenishment must remain fully automated. Waste materials from Zulu 9 will periodically arrive at Site-19 within black body bags. Personnel at Site-19 are to make no attempts to identify their contents and are not permitted to interact with them beyond facilitating their incineration. Null engram disqualifiers. The following is a list of attributes which disqualify a candidate for null engram status. Former participation in after-school clubs or extracurricular activities, including as an organizer or educator. Former inclusion in any concert band, marching band, or any musical ensemble during adolescence. Prior attendance of any form of summer camp. Having completed an upper secondary education at an American high school or equivalent institution. Attendance to any homecoming dance events within such a facility, regardless of context. Being born or conceived prior to December 31st, 1976. Further information is classified 5/7676. Warning. The following document contains information and images of a sensitive nature and may not be safe for viewing. If you access this file by accident and do not possess null engram clearance, do not proceed. Null engram eyes only. Enter Provisional Personal Verification, PPV. PPV verification completed. Welcome Research Lead Julia Locke. Initializing retinal scanner. Macrosaccades will be tracked throughout your time accessing this document. Extreme levels of deviancy may suggest affection by SCP-7676. Please disengage and notify your superior if deviancy threshold exceeds 75%. Case file photograph of a student subsumed by SCP-7676. Item Number, SCP-7676, Object Class Memetic, Containment Class Maxer. Special Containment Procedures. Photograph of North Hillcrest students have been disseminated throughout the site. Any changes in the depicted subjects are to be recorded. Zulu 9 is built around the North Hillcrest High School and is hereafter referred to as the Exclusion Zone. Unauthorized entry into the Exclusion Zone is forbidden and must be prevented at all costs. The following measures have been taken to prevent entry. All entrances into the Exclusion Zone, save for the front entrance, have been sealed with concrete. The front entrance is fitted with an airlock that may only be opened through majority approval of High Command. 12 Scranton Reality Anchors, SRAs, have been placed around the Exclusion Zone, excluding the area of the auditorium. The Exclusion Zone is secured with 3 tiers of ground level, subsurface, and aerial automatic security. Load-bearing points around the auditorium have been fitted with nitroglycerin-based molecular explosives. If the above measures fail, they are to be detonated. Evacuation of on-site personnel is secondary priority. Upon entering the Exclusion Zone, SCP-7676-G are to be apprehended. They must then be sedated and prepared for surgical debridement. Medical staff are to carefully excise the dermis and subcutaneous tissue of their face. These are to be labeled with the student's name and placed on full display in Sector 2 for monitoring. And the site will be put on high alert should any of these faces begin to show signs of rot. Once preparation is complete, the instance must then be administered a paralytic agent and prepared for delivery to Site-19. At every step, care is to be taken to avoid a subject's death on school grounds. Jesus spoke, "Suffer little children, and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." Any null engram personnel displaying outward and repeated expressions of sentimentality for the past are to be restrained and observed until the completion of their cadence event. The resulting SCP-7676-G will then be operated on and disposed of as outlined above. Personnel are not to enter the hallway to the auditorium. Retinal scan results. Rating: 26%. Clear. Microsaccade deviation nominal. You may proceed. Description: SCP-7676 is the group designation for the anomalous events and phenomena centered around the North Hillcrest High School and its senior class of 1976. Located in Franklin County, Wyoming, its overall nature is highly dynamic, and it is capable of adapting to countermeasures and neutralization attempts. 7676's primary characteristic is a virulent infohazard, termed SCP-7676-Recall, or SCP-7676-R, which attacks by way of weaponizing nostalgia. Persons who regularly interact with information pertaining to North Hillcrest High School or its senior class of 1976 are susceptible to SCP-7676-R. There is a greater risk for those who directly handle artifacts originating from the school or personal effects of the aforementioned students. There is a greater risk for those who directly handle artifacts originating from the school or the lasting marks of the aforementioned students. It should be noted that SCP-7676-R is primarily empathetic, being dependent on the experiences of the individual exposed. Null engram disqualifications were put in place to limit the vulnerability of personnel involved in the project. In 7676-R's early stages, the infected will regularly idealize or fret over their past, specifically their childhood. It is through this obsessive recollection that the infected may undergo a cadence event wherein they experience 1. An enlargement of the temporal lobe and the development of a targeted form of hyperthymesia relating to memories of one's adolescence. 2. A burning sensation behind the ears. 3. Memories that begin to feature places and persons unknown, but purportedly intimate to the subject. 4. Depersonalization and body image issues along with an irrational fear of having their faces touched. 5. Intrusive childhood memories from the perspective of another person. 6. Feelings of numbness, temporary bouts of partial paralysis. 7. Ego death followed by a single-minded fixation on intrusive memories. 8. A separate personality forming on the basis of intrusive memories. 9. Violent and immediate full-body transfiguration. The end result of the transfiguration is an instance of 7676 Gestalt, or 7676G, a subject who is the perfect mental and physical duplicate of one of North Hillcrest's senior class of 1976, specifically a deceased student. Instances of 7676G created through cadence events exhibit no anomalous traits besides a cellular stasis upon death. These students' bodies will not decay until the student's identity subsumes new infectee, at which point it will rapidly rot. Instances of 7676G will proceed towards North Hillcrest High School and attempt to enter the school's auditorium. If they are successful, all photographic or recorded depictions of the subject will alter in some way which completely disfigures the face, leaving them unrecognizable. Heavy scarring, penetrative injuries, the removal of facial orifices, and deep lacerations have all been observed, the depictions varying across multiple images of the same subject. Furthermore, their entry inevitably triggers unpredictable reality-altering and chronological phenomena at random. While this has previously included events nationwide, it is no longer restricted by distance. Based on the escalation of phenomena as more student identities are subsumed by 7676, as well as the body of evidence collected over the years, see addenda, it is believed that a full assembly of the student body would trigger an XK class end-of-the-world scenario. It is believed that a full assembly of the student body will allow the ceremony to begin. The auditorium currently houses over 99% of the North Hillcrest senior class of 1976, with the majority being comprised of personnel and civilians that have undergone cadence events. The congregation continually plays a simple 10-note tune, SCP-7676-melody, vocally, and on all manner of orchestral instruments, with only minor aberrations such as students singing out of key or playing the wrong note occasionally. Several anomalies relating to 7676 are contained and cataloged by the Foundation under a variety of item number designations. While previously studied alongside 7676, its developing virulence has led to the loss of numerous Foundation personnel on these projects. These objects files have since been edited by null engram personnel in order to eliminate connections to 7676. These objects files have since been edited by null engram personnel in order to eliminate the lives of involved students. Physical copies of these documents can be found in the site archives. Discovery. Access Addendum. Day 2 of Original Assessment. 7676 was originally categorized in May of 1976 when the entire senior class and its faculty did not return home from school for several days. Dispatched agents observed the affected for a period of 48 hours, during which time they performed various mundane activities such as attending class and after-school events. The town's residents were similarly affected. The situation with North Hillcrest and its students was not perceived as abnormal by any means. The situation with North Hillcrest and its students was not a threat to you or your loved ones by any means. When not otherwise engaged in scholastic activities, students would line up in front of their lockers until the first bell of the next day. They would then sing, whistle, or hum 7676M in concert with one another. These students would remain in this state, ignoring outside stimuli regardless of their physical condition. Some were found to have soiled themselves overnight only to continue the melody unabated. Faculty members would lie prone and remain silent during this time. Further irregularities include 13 students, while recorded as attending class, were unable to be located. A student council survey to determine the year-long school theme was returned with non-standard answers filled in, such as remembrance and symphonic. All members of the band wrote in penance. Students exhibited a complete lack of hostility, anxiety, and any form of antisocial behavior, focusing on their studies and extracurricular activities with zealous enthusiasm. Flyers were distributed regarding an upcoming reunion concert and encouraging audience participation. Benefactors Syncope Symphony were explicitly thanked for donating several instruments. An increase in faith-based club participation was noted in all students and teachers, including known atheists. The corpse of freshman Nathaniel Lyons was found in the library, cause of death determined to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the left temple. The auditorium was found to be impregnable. While canvassing school grounds, a class photo was discovered in the main hall. There were so many of us that year. 13 of the depicted students displayed facial disfigurements, and these were quickly found to correlate to the missing persons. The following is an interview with Valerie and Albert Abrams, local residents and parents to one of the missing students. The audio was recorded by researcher Julia Locke, the first evening of Foundation involvement. This transcript includes after-action notation from the agent. Forward. Agent Locke is permitted into their home under the pretense of Harvard recruitment for the couple's son, Kevin, who was among the missing students. Introduction and pleasantries have been cut for brevity. Miss Abrams is kind enough to start some tea before joining us in the living room. She takes a seat across the table from myself. Her husband stands behind her. Both of them are grinning ear to ear all the while. Mr. Abrams has a noticeable eye tick. Locke. Now, before we get started, where is Kevin? Mr. Abrams. Kevin? Oh, well, he should be in class right now. Class is in session. Miss Abrams. Such a good boy. Locke. Class? What classes does North Hillcrest provide at this time of night? Mr. Abrams. Ha! Kevin has many responsibilities. He's a strong young man. He places a hand on her shoulder. Miss Abrams. Such a good boy. Locke. At 8 o'clock on a Saturday? Mr. Abrams. He has a lot of people counting on him. Do you have any idea? Locke. I've actually checked the school's itinerary. There's nothing scheduled for tonight, let alone this weekend, sir. School is not in session. They exchange a confused glance here and fail to meaningfully respond. Locke. Mr. and Mrs. Abrams, I'm sorry, but when was the last time you saw your son? Mr. Abrams. Well, you know how it is with teenagers, always zipping in and out of the house, God bless. My boy has so much on his plate. Something shifts in Miss Abrams. There's this look on her face, eyes widened, mouth agape, the slow dawning realization that something's amiss, that it doesn't add up. I lean in, giving my most sympathetic look. Locke. How long has it been, Miss Abrams? Miss Abrams. I heard him last night. I stood by his bedroom door and I could hear him. Mr. Abrams. Val? Miss Abrams. I heard him and I could hear him. Boy, he was right here. I sat on the other side of the door and I could hear him. I could hear boy, how Kevin was here. Locke. What was your son saying, Mrs. Abrams? Miss Abrams. Oh, he wasn't speaking at all, Justine. He was singing. Boy, he had the voice of... It was the voice of an angel. Mr. Abrams. He's come such a long way, North Hillcrest. Well, they've got one hell of a band, you know, and they're gearing up for the performance of a lifetime. Miss Abrams. Kevin is so gifted. He's got an important role in the ensemble. Locke. That's nice, but Miss Abrams, I'm sorry, could we back up? Mr. Abrams. Those kids, I'll tell you, the potential in these children is nothing like I've ever seen. They're really our future. You did right in coming here, miss. Their music is a beautiful thing. Cherish it. Miss Abrams. Do you remember how they used to sing, dear? Mr. Abrams. Baby, how could I forget? The couple look at one another and start humming this odd little ditty. I clear my throat. Locke. This is odd, you see. Nothing in my records indicate that Kevin was musically inclined. If my earlier prodding was enough to strain their cognitive dissonance, this seemed to shatter it outright. Miss Abrams withdraws, bowing her head and clutching her hands tightly in her lap. Mr. Abrams starts and stops speaking twice. Features fighting a losing battle of composure. Chest heaves with shallow breaths. 23. Your little Amelie. He comes to his knees beside his wife and takes her hands in his own. Mr. Abrams. My boy. Locke. It's okay. Take your time, sir. Mr. Abrams. He was a good kid. Asking around town, they'll tell you, he was the sweetest, kindest boy. He'd do anything to protect the people he loved. He'd do anything to protect his parents that he loved so much. Locke. I'm sorry, was... Mr. Abrams. That's why... I had to look away. Couldn't bear to watch this man cry. And I knew there were no words I could offer him. You knew because you've been there yourself. You felt it too, the knife in your heart, the agony of one taken too soon. We know it all too well. Miss Abrams. We
just want the world to know our Kevin was a hero.
Mr. Abrams.
My boy. My baby boy.
Locke. Miss Abrams.
I think you need to leave, Agent, please. No more questions.
Mr. Abrams.
Why? Did it have to be him?
I should have pressed further, but I dropped the matter. It's odd. On some level, I knew I was obligated to prod as much as I was able. But it was something about this kid. I felt terrible for him. It was implacable. You were thinking of Emily, weren't you? She's here, with us. I don't understand it, but it felt as if I owed it to him to respect their wishes. As if I owed it to his memory. Forcible removal from the grounds was sufficient to return students and their families to their right state of mind. The faculty were able to be evacuated thereafter. None were cognizant enough to provide concrete information on the missing students or the auditorium's inaccessibility. The building was closed and cordoned off under pretense of a gas leak. The students were to be redistributed throughout nearby school districts for a period of 2 weeks while investigators thoroughly canvassed school property and prepared for a breach of the auditorium. This would be interrupted by Incident 7676-1. Retinal scan results. Rating, 57% hazardous. Rise in microsecond deviancy detected. Please disengage for at least an hour before continuing. Incident log 7676-1. Access addendum. The following is a list of events that occurred the evening after the removal of North Hillcrest's student body, as recounted by eyewitnesses and security feeds. 2132. Several dozen students are noted to be missing from their homes and are reported wandering through the streets. Those who lived closest to North Hillcrest began to arrive on school grounds, congregating in the football field. Reinforcements are requested by Foundation agents. 2136 through 2153. Over 15 students occupy the football field and refuse to comply with orders to disband. Mobile task forces are dispatched, ETA projected at 20 minutes. An on-site agent approaches in order to intimidate the teens to leave. He retreats when the students look upon him in unison, claiming, "They all have the same face. All as one is all we are. You can be too." The school bell chimes and a single student approaches the building. The entire senior class fully assembles in the field. The assembly takes the form of a cross. All students recite 7676-M as Foundation staff cease defensive maneuvers and lay down in the grass. The school bell chimes. The exterior door connecting to the auditorium opens of its own accord, and a second student departs from the crowd, following the first towards the open doorway. The sound of instruments can be heard emanating from within the auditorium. They are playing a discordant cacophony, with each instrument being out of harmony with one another. 2255 to 2303. Task forces arrive on scene and move in to intercept and easily detain the second student. The school bell chimes and a third approaches. Agent Reeds and McDowell are tasked with rescue of the first student as he steadily approaches the stage, whose curtains are drawn. Krogluski and Shields are instructed to man the doors to ensure they do not close. The rest of the unit works to disperse crowd via deployment of tear gas. The auditorium is infiltrated as tear gas is fired into the crowd. Reeds and McDowell advance on the stage cautiously, calling out to the student through the din of music. He ignores them and clambers up onto the stage, disappearing behind the curtain. Out in the field, the squadron has broken the lines of student belligerents, many of whom fled the gas. The few remaining are swiftly detained. One young woman is non-responsive. McDowell is the first to reach the stage. Heading up the stairs from the right wing, he shouts over the noise, receiving no response. The pair reach center stage in front of the curtain. Reed takes point, readying his weapon. McDowell stands to the side, grasping the curtain. With a free hand, he counts down steadily from 3, then pulls back the curtain. 2304. The remains of 13 adolescents are seen scattered across the stage, held aloft by an unseen force. Though their bodies are limp, their heads can be seen to move, unsteadily playing their respective instruments. Due to the grievous damage to their faces, they are unable to be recognized. The male student retrieves a trombone, and there is a deafening crack as his neck is instantly bent backwards with a heavy concussive force. His body is held in place. As he brings his head forward, it can be seen that little remains of his face beyond the viscera of a large gaping wound, the visage of an angel. He places the cup of the trombone to this wound and begins to play. 2305 to 2315. Krogulski is struck with the door as it attempts to close. Both her and Shields strain to keep it from closing and relay this development to Reeds and McDowell. All agents are able to successfully exfiltrate and the door slams shut. Foundation staff rendered immobile by SCP-7676-M recover with no issue, and the remaining students experience confusion, having no recollection of their behavior. The unresponsive student is found not to be breathing, eliciting cries of concern from her peers as they beg for medical assistance. Medic Johansson kneels next to her and attempts mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The first attempt fails, with Johansson reporting the lack of a pulse. He leans back in to try again, and the school bell chimes. The unresponsive student's face rapidly putrefies as Johansson places his lips on its mouth. Johansson recoils and retches as the cadaver is sharply lifted into the air and towards the auditorium doors. As they do not open, her remains are messily pulled under the door's bottom clearance over the course of several minutes. As they do not open, her remains are shepherded to that golden place. She is reborn among the choir over the course of several minutes. Afterward, the task force would remain on site in order to establish an exclusion zone to prohibit future entry and prepare for isolating the town under blackout protocol. The morning after the incident, Sites 19, 23, 38, and 169 receive reports of numerous medical anomalies in their jurisdictions. Over 15 comatose individuals, ages ranging from 4 to 19, were found to have suddenly expired overnight. Further, a 6-year-old patient in Tennessee, who was recovering from routine surgery, suffered a grand mal seizure and died within minutes. In cases where a time could be identified, they were found to correlate to the male student's interaction upon the stage. Staff at Site 106 would also report an incident involving a car crash on Interstate 40. First responders inspecting the remains of a young adult ejected through the windshield found them to be responding to stimuli despite their skull having been fatally crushed upon impact. Based on calls to emergency services, the accident had occurred concurrently to the dead student's absorption by the auditorium. Over the course of the next several months, childhood mortality would increase worldwide by 23% through a combination of a marked upstage in birth defects and delivery complications and expiration from terminal illness. All lies. You know they lie. It's what they do. Early containment. Access addendum. All seniors of North Hillcrest were captured and sent to a detainment camp at Site 41. Due to families' insistence that their children were simply attending school, no disinformation measures needed to be maintained. They were held in detention for interview and study. None were able to provide actionable intelligence or an explanation for their behavior, and were noted as speaking with a tone and cadence mimicking the notes in 7575-M. They did not seem aware they were doing so. The chaotic music emanating from within the auditorium had not ceased, as no anomalous effects were detected in D class who were exposed to it. An analytics department team was tasked with recording and study of the composition. The date of the reunion concert endorsed by Syncope Symphony came and went, and no changes were noted to occur with the auditorium. We can wait as long as it takes. We have our whole lives ahead of us after all. By early August, several personnel at Site 41 had adopted the speaking cadence of the North Hillcrest students. Further, agents stationed within the exclusion zone began to report that family members of the students had begun to sing or whistle 7676-M while in public. Quarantine measures were enacted, limiting the number of affected personnel to 27. On August 21st, the analytic department submitted their findings to Site 41's leadership. Of over 300 hours of recorded audio, no correlation could be found when comparing sections of the composition to either classical or contemporary orchestral arrangements. When cross-referenced to material archived in Foundation records, a single match was discovered. The composition was found to be a perfect reproduction of a 1957 D-Class performance of SCP-012. Can you hear it? She'll be calling you, Julia. A secondary analysis of 7676M in light of this revelation identified the progression of notes within it to coincide with select notes from the opening sections of SCP-012. This information was relayed to High Command, and an order for decommissioning was issued. Affected staff remained in quarantine, and all remaining 113 students were terminated. The families were handled thereafter. There was nothing that could be done. Research into memetics and infohazards was still very much in its infancy around this time, and there was a lot of uncertainty with how the situation would develop with a rogue element over 100 strong. This was the Bowie era mind, and the General didn't take well to rogue elements, much less ones in poorly understood fields. Affiliations of Syncope Symphony only deepened fears. The turnover rate for those working on a Syncope anomaly was staggering, not only for the cognitive dangers to personnel, but from the horrors we personally had to witness in these schools. The things these anomalies would do to their bodies, to their faces. It was unbearable. There were times we couldn't so much as identify victims. Time and again, we could do nothing to stop these tragedies. The Camp Kanab phenomena out in West Virginia, Salvation High in Indiana, Kirk Lawnwood, the list goes on. Either our planning was too poor, containment too light, or we simply couldn't act in time to save these kids. Without swift action to neutralize the situation, we risked further outbreak. You always held onto it, didn't you? That sense of guilt, like it was somehow your fault. Amelie doesn't blame you. None of us do. The analytics department report was the final nail in the coffin. We'd been trying to reproduce something coherent from SCP-012 for decades by this point, picking up on attempts by earlier organizations dating back into antiquity, failing miserably time and again to get anything even remotely listenable out of it. Now, up to this point, syncope had been largely assumed to refer to syncopation. Some had assumed the name related to the mental effects of anomalies stemming from their influence. As in pathology, syncope refers to consciousness loss, easy connection to make. In a grammatical sense, however, syncope defines the emission of sound from within a spoken word. Library, libere, chocolat, chocolate, madame, ma'am. The removal of key elements to change the sound of the end result. It was clear to us upon reading that report that 7676M was only the beginning of a larger piece. It was the overture to On Mount Golgotha, the song that will unmake time. Syncope taught us how to play it just right. Julia Locke. Experiment Log, Access Addendum. During Incident 7676-1, several Foundation personnel were exposed to SCP-7676-M, including 18 Mobile Task Force personnel and Researcher Reese. Researcher Reese had come to North Hillcrest to study the potential memetic effects of 7676-M. As such, he volunteered to isolate himself from the Foundation at large in order to document the effects of 7676-M. Dr. Weirn volunteered to study Researcher Reese during the process. Attached is a journal Dr. Weirn kept during this time, with sensitive information redacted. I went to see James Reese for the first time today. I found the containment for James to be unnecessarily strict. 2 guards gave me a mental evaluation test, and I had to pass through an airlock to enter the concrete-lined containment cell. I've seen these measures used to contain some of the worst monsters in the world. Seeing James in the cell, comfortable with his furniture he'd brought from home, was a nice juxtaposition. We sat down on the couch together and watched some TV. I've always found it surprising that we're able to get the $6 million man down here. I was glad to see James was able to relax. To the untrained eye, he still seemed to be just his normal self. He made jokes about his all-expenses-paid vacation and drank quite a bit of beer. To me, however, he seemed a bit more quiet than usual. It was like he was stuck in thought. Here's a specific conversation I remember. Hey, do you know about the Panoptic project they're working on at Site 19? he said. He spoke in a monotone to avoid transferring the meme. I know of it, I replied, in monotone as well. He was stationed to the project before he was transferred to 7676. What do you need? They were running an experiment for it. New visualization tech. Something to that effect. Could you fetch the results for me? I wanted to see if I could give my thoughts on them. I shook my head. Even if I could, I doubt they'd let me take anything written by you out of here. He laid back. It's not like I'm going to be useful to the Foundation much longer. We were quiet for a few minutes after that. I wanted to ask the obvious questions, but I was not sure if I could. I wanted to ask for salvation, but I was not sure if I could. I've requested the instantiation of a mandatory exercise routine for James. Professionally, it's difficult to tell between symptoms of 7676M and the effects of a sustained sedentary lifestyle. Personally, he's been getting fat. I told James about it, and while he complained that he came down here to get away from his wife, he understands. Speaking of which, no real symptoms yet. Thank God. Maybe this is all there is to it. First real sign of infection today. There were signs earlier. James kept wanting to watch reruns of The Life of Riley. I didn't catch it at the time, but he probably watched it quite a bit as a kid. Today, all he wanted to talk about was his childhood. The summer camps he went to, playing ball in the yard. He'd talked about it before, and I figured he was just letting his life flash before his eyes. Now he seems genuinely distressed over it. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry I'm not able to talk to you anymore. Researcher Hopkins noted something similar. In one of the MTF agents that was exposed, I've requested the file from him. In other news, James has almost completely become another person. I could see dozens of makeshift 50s toys scattered around the cell when I visited today. When I was talking to him, he seemed anxious for me to leave so he could get back to them. My grandfather was diagnosed with dementia. As he became worse, talking to him was like seeing a completely different person. I bring that up because I'm thinking of him whenever I talk to James. When I talk to him about the things we did together, the thermodynamics paper, the lake trip, they should have never been in that water, just as we had gone to school on the wrong day. That one moment is all it takes. The Foundation knows. They know who we are. They know what we're trying to do. He looks at me with the blankest stare. The difference is that James still enthusiastically talks about his childhood memories, just not the ones he actually had. Everything he's been talking about for the past few weeks never happened. Hopkins finally got back to me with that file, and it's the same. They're both fixating on these fabricated memories. I talked to James today. It's been a courtesy for the past few weeks. I listen while he recounts the childhood he never had. After a period of silence, he said, Remember how we used to hop the fence at the mall to steal cigs? I nodded along with him, and thought of the time we had had our first smoke. It was the three of us back then. Adam, Kylie, and myself. We'd each say we were at the other's house, but really, all we did was look for trouble. I've never smoked in my life. I'm going to have to sequester myself in the cell. Hopefully, I can provide a more detailed account of my condition than James did. It happened today. I was sitting with James when all of a sudden he started panicking, rubbing behind his ears. I blinked, and James was gone. A teenager I didn't recognize stood in his place. It was like he was turned inside out. His tongue was yanked out of his mouth, and his new skin came out with it. In other news, I've had more intrusive memories. I can't remember my own mother, my graduation, my career at the Foundation. All I know is that I should freak out about it. It's trying to get me to panic. I can barely remember my old self. What are these words? This isn't my handwriting. I really can't write in this anymore. Who's Reese? Who's Weird? I don't know why they're keeping me in here. I just want to see Mom and Dad. They must be worried sick. Retinal scan results. Rating 19%, clear. Sanity confirmed. Progression of SCP-7676. Access Addendum. What follows is an abridged timeline of events that have been connected to the 7676 phenomena. Note that not all events were known to be related at the time of occurrence, with their inclusion being post hoc additions. December 1976. Site 41. Notes recovered from Dr. Hopkins and an infected Dr. Weirn form the basis for designating the emergent 7676R and 7676G phenomena. Dr. Weirn is placed under quarantine, and the former researcher Reese is isolated for study. All personnel present during Incident 7676-1 are detained and placed in quarantine, as are any personnel exposed to 7676-M in the course of their research. Exclusion Zone. Agent Emerson becomes violent upon being unable to recognize his reflection and has to be sedated. He is sent to Site 41 to recover. Site 41. 2 infected personnel transfigure into North Hillcrest students. Due to the sound emitted during the process, it becomes referred to as a cadence event. Site 19. Researcher Toussaint, head researcher for SCP-33-2, is recorded humming 7676-M in the site cafeteria. They are not yet ready. Contact tracing reveals there was no previous exposure. February 1977. Site 41. A conference regarding Symphony is held at Site 41. Attending are containment specialists and project leads for a number of anomalies with ties to the group. Police reports filed in Franklin County and the surrounding areas reveal that several alumni who had graduated from North Hillcrest between 1946 and 1975 have gone missing. Site 41. Dr. Hopkins is discovered by his secretary holding a one-way conversation over the telephone. Exclusion Zone. The school bell chimes. It's calling you home. Agent Watkins proceeds to leave his post and enters the auditorium. Site 41. All subjects infected with 7676-R have undergone a cadence event. All but 3 are terminated, with bodies being placed in cold storage. 1 rots at a rapid pace while in transit. Several personnel in quarantine have not yet begun to display signs of 7676-R. Site 17. Dr. Baker experiences a sudden seizure while developing photos taken within North Hillcrest. First responders note that her eyes had changed momentarily from hazel to blue. It's been so long since I've had eyes that can see. March 1977. Franklin County. Locals have begun digging a tunnel 5 miles from the exclusion zone as part of a sewage project. Unbeknownst to the Foundation, the tunnel has been diverted by a 7676G instance embedded in county leadership. Site 17. Dr. Baker is reported as missing. Exclusion Zone. 3 instances of 7676G attempted to enter the site under the cover of darkness. 2 are detained, though the 3rd is shot while wrestling with an agent's weapon. The school bell chimes, and her body is forcibly drawn to the auditorium. On-site personnel issued non-lethal weaponry. She's calling for you. Can't you see how she needs you? What would you do to give her a second chance? To give all of us a second chance? Please. I'm so cold. Site 41. Dr. Hopkins is seen by med staff due to discovering a lump in his breast. It is diagnosed as a benign tumor and is scheduled for removal. June 1977. Exclusion zone radius broadened by 2.5 kilometers. Property within the expanded zone is purchased by Foundation front companies and demarked against trespassing. Foundation personnel have embedded themselves into governments of the surrounding provinces, discovering and apprehending the instance of 7676G in Franklin County. Exclusion zone. Agent Emerson is rushed into urgent care, having been found bloodied and near death in his quarters. The flesh around his chin and mouth had been mostly sawed off and discarded. Selfish, selfish, selfish. 3 personnel, Researcher Locke, Researcher Kimmel, and Agent Winters, have not shown any signs of infection. Records indicate each have been homeschooled as children. Site 41. The photos of 30 North Hillcrest students become affected by SCP-7676 overnight. Just as the Lamb has suffered, so shall we, a resurrection unto all when the choir sings. Staff at North Hillcrest investigate the containment breach and discover the exit point of a man-made tunnel on school property, a few meters from the auditorium's exterior entrance. Surveillance footage is found to be doctored, having been playing earlier recordings on loop. The tunnel is collapsed and the outer door sealed with concrete. Several population centers report seeing a large number of children flying through the sky. Approximately twice as many children nationwide were stillborn in a 3-month period following this event. The trend is documented by the civilian medical community. Site 41. Dr. Hopkins enters surgery. As the tumor is removed, it is revealed to have been a face, and it begins to audibly wail. The lead surgeon and both assailants cease the operation and begin to consume it over Hopkins' exposed surgical wound. The doctors couldn't save him, just like they couldn't save her. Only you can, only you can, only you can, only you can, only you understand. All three undergo a cadence event, but are terminated before they can escape the facility. Hopkins is treated and placed in containment. August 1977. Exclusion Zone. 14 instances of 7676G gain access to the site using the credentials of Dr. Baker. 9 are able to make it to the auditorium, and the rest are sent to Site 41 for processing. The flesh of Dr. Hopkins' back and chest can be seen to be bulging and inflamed in several places. Within 3 days, the bulge takes the shape of human faces, which writhe and attempt to push themselves upward from within. Though Hopkins is euthanized through lethal injection, the faces continue to struggle and weep. The body is incinerated. An analytics department meta-analysis of personnel affected by the anomaly reveals cases of 7676R emerge wherever files relating to Syncope Symphony are accessible, albeit only in cases where those files include information relating to North Hillcrest. 7676 is classified an info hazard, and InfoSec measures are initiated across all sites. Site 41 and its staff are liquidated. Anything to protect their precious veil. It cannot last forever. There must come a point when the curtain is pulled back. We have quite the show prepared. Researcher Locke, Researcher Kimmel, and Agent Winters are all assigned to the exclusion zone, alongside a 10-man crew of D-Class personnel. High Command begins the transfer of personnel with homeschooling in their background to the exclusion zone. June 1979. Exclusion Zone. A D-Class riot breaks out, assisted by Researcher Kimmel. They overpower security and breach the school interior. As the school bell chimes and the auditorium opens, 27 are able to make it inside. We're begging you, Julia. Our cries can't fall on deaf ears. The vector of SCP-7676R transmission for Researcher Kimmel is determined to be her attendance of a summer camp in 1957. United Kingdom. After a several-hour delivery attempt resulting in an emergency C-section, an infant is born with the face of one of North Hillcrest's students. A marked increase in psychopathy towards children is recorded worldwide. A marked increase in life expectancy is recorded worldwide. Null engram qualifiers are finalized. Researcher staff in the exclusion zone are isolated. The transfer of food and supplies is relegated to Mobile Task Force Eta-10. See no evil. February 1996. Exclusion Zone. A team of task force members attack and overwhelm site staff using high explosives and inside knowledge. They quickly bypass security forces and gain access to the exclusion zone. 11 7676G instances join the auditorium. 16 Foundation casualties are recorded. After the recitation of Angelas at the Vatican, Pope John Paul II leads the public in a rendition of 7676M. The sheep follow his voice. They will know him and be of him. The song that plays from the heavens is for you and me. It is for Amelie. For the next 6 months, infrequent reports of large objects and people randomly appearing and ceasing existence were received by Foundation fronts. Exclusion Zone. Researcher Locke is promoted to head researcher, being the only living staff member with expertise in both Syncope Symphony and 7676. Supply chain is automated, and researcher Locke implements conscription measures to replenish the site with civilian personnel. By order of the Overwatch Council, as of 1996, February 13th, all of the students are present within the auditorium save one. I've taken the liberty of reclassifying 7676 under the Maxer class. Every measure in our power is to be taken to prevent the auditorium from being completed. The side effects so far have been disastrous, and we have enough tertiary documentation to know that a full completion of the auditorium would initiate a ZK-class terminate reality scenario. I know this has been hard on you, Julia. Please hang in there. 05-11. March 1996 to July 2022. Containment of SCP-7676 stable with minimal loss of life. Various. 312 attempts are made by the final 7676G identity to reach North Hillcrest property over this period of time, though 45 are through the infection of D-class conscripts within the site itself. All are identified in the early stages of 7676R and processed according to procedure. Exclusion Zone. Due to her advanced age, Overwatch Command issues orders for researcher Locke to choose a successor among the conscripted D-class, awaiting response. Yes, we're waiting. Update. Access file. Dear Sirs and Madams of Overwatch Command, I have received your request for my retirement and I must respectfully decline. I know 7676 better than anybody. I am the only one who knows what it needs to be done. After all these years, I finally see it. How deeply have you bored into my past? Of course, you were looking for infection vectors, anything that might risk breaching containment. You had to have known my medical history. You know what I went through in 75. For 23 days, my darling Amelie fought for her place on this earth. 23 days of prodding, of surgeries, of cold hands and unfamiliar voices, blinding lights beating down on eyes that would never open. We were fortunate to have access to the level of care afforded to those in our line of work. In the end, it simply wasn't enough. She was simply too underdeveloped to breathe on her own. What little time her father and I had with her, brief moments of respite for skin-to-skin contact. I hold those blessed few hours with me in my heart, a life sustained only in memory. She deserved to have a chance. The opportunity of life. She deserved to love, to laugh, to experience the successes and failures of sadness and joy and all those small moments we all take for granted. It's the gift those kids at North Hillcrest are trying to give us all. The change they're trying to make. It's what Syncope has been working towards all this time. A chance at life for those who have had theirs stolen. I'm going back to that school. Back to where it all started. I will take my place among the chorus, and with every goddamn ounce of air in my lungs, I will sing. All of my breath for hers. I have not been compromised. My name is Julia Locke, and I am of sound mind. I am acting of my own volition in order to uphold our noble Foundation's third mission statement. The order to protect. The salvation of countless thousands is at stake, and it would be a failure of my duty, both to our organization and as a mother, to not mend the wrongs of the past and ensure a brighter path ahead for mankind. I won't be here to see that tomorrow. I'll never witness with my own eyes when all of our families are reunited and the streets come alive with precious laughter and song. I know that I'll never see my little Amelie. I can only pray that she will keep me in her memory. J. Locke. Retinal scan results. Rating: 95% permanent damage. Agent Locke is compromised. Initiating Mobile Task Force Scramble Order. Shutting down computer. Shutdown. Blocked by admin override. Attempting level 5 shutdown. What is this? Agent Julia Locke is to be detained. Mobile task forces have been scrambled to exclusion zone protecting measures in plic. Begin activation of diamond containment What is happening? Error. System corruption detected. Beginning basic reality verification tests. You're not Julia. You're seeing through her eyes, but you're not her. 1 + 1 no longer equals 2. Those aren't her eyes reading this. Why? What do you think you will find here? Why? Answers? Why? Then just listen. Why? Why? Oh, how it will get inside of you. We can listen together. Shutdown complete. There's no time for tears. Your mind like a sieve. The concert is about to begin. We've been waiting so patiently. Thank you. Alright, and that's the end of the reading, researcher. Seeing as we're still alive right now, or at least I think I am, there's a good chance she didn't make it. Of course. Who knows? What happened might have been a good thing. We might be living in a better place because of her. Well, who knows? Thank you very much for coming, researcher. See you in the future.